Welcome to Functional Philosophy. I'm Charles Tew. That's T as in tango, E as in echo, and W as in whiskey. This is episode number 8, and its title is Objectivism is not Libertarianism. Most people, including many objectivists, think the objectivism-libertarianism issue is just another case of a subgroup overemphasizing its differences with everyone else in its general category. They think objectivism rightly belongs under libertarianism on the basis of what are essential similarities from the perspective of outsiders. They think objectivists are claiming to be special, either because they're too close to the situation to see that their differences from libertarians are trivial to outsiders, or because they want special attention that isn't warranted from people who aren't academically interested in the non-essential details of political splinter groups. They think this is just another case of what Freud called the narcissism of minor differences. They are wrong. I'm going to define these two concepts, get down to their essences, and explain why objectivism can't fit into libertarianism if we want to think about the world clearly. So, what is objectivism? Objectivism is the philosophy of Ayn Rand. It is an integrated set of ideas about the fundamental nature of existence, of man, and of their relationship. It isn't her collected beliefs on every subject. It doesn't include her thoughts on fashion, or psychology, or humor, or any other special science or branch of thought. So, objectivism is no less than Ayn Rand's stated philosophical ideas, and no more. Objectivism can't go further than Ayn Rand herself went. Even if one believes that everything in objectivism is true, it can't be truthism. It would be absurd and conceptually redundant to define a philosophy as whatever turns out to be true. We already have a concept for whatever turns out to be true. It's called truth. You don't add anything to the intellectual discussion if all you say is, I believe whatever is true. That's very well, and it says something good about your character, but a philosophy has to be a definite set of ideas. It's certainly possible, however, for objectivists to hold ideas, even philosophical ones, that build on top of objectivism but aren't a part of objectivism themselves. For instance, I regard Dr. Leonard Peikoff's theory of induction as true and consonant with objectivism, but not part of objectivism. Objectivism is the philosophy of Ayn Rand, including all of her interrelated positions on metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics. Now, what is libertarianism, aside from a set of ideas plagiarized from Ayn Rand and stripped of intellectual merit by subhuman trash like Murray Rothbard? Well, libertarianism is importantly different from objectivism in that its tenets weren't developed by a single thinker. So, unlike objectivism, it can't be defined as the ideas of Mr. X. You must instead look to see what shared premise lies at the base of the thinking of all of the different kinds of people who call themselves libertarians. When you do this, you will find that libertarianism is the political philosophy that upholds the non-aggression axiom. That's my definition, and it's not tentative. I believe that's the right one. Libertarianism is the political philosophy that upholds the non-aggression axiom. The non-aggression axiom is at the base of a range of political beliefs, those classified as libertarian. There's a range of beliefs because interpretations of the content and implications of the non-aggression axiom vary. Now, I'm not begging the question here. I didn't start by assuming that all libertarians believe in the non-aggression axiom, and then go on to arbitrarily disqualify self-identified libertarians who don't believe in it, and then go on to use their disqualification as proof of my original assumption. I started out by noticing that some people call themselves libertarians. I proceeded to investigate what beliefs self-identified libertarians had in common, and noticed that they derived their beliefs from the non-aggression axiom. I decided that derivative of the non-aggression axiom was an objective classification worth forming, and so on the basis of the deeper similarity I'd found between self-identified libertarians, I defined libertarianism. That is the model for how to define who belongs in a group without resorting to the intellectually bankrupt practice of defining by self-identification. There are some self-identified libertarians who don't fit into libertarianism. And there are some people who don't identify as libertarians who do fit. The question is an objective one, not one of subjective self-labeling. The definition of libertarianism is not the ideas of those who call themselves libertarians. I hope it's obvious why a concept formed on that basis would be worse than useless. Okay, so let's look at the definitions we've established and see what they tell us about objectivism's relationship to libertarianism. There are two parts of a definition, the genus and the differentia. The genus notes the category within which a concept falls, and the differentia notes the characteristic that makes a concept unique within its category. I don't think that's an oversimplified description of a definition for our purposes here, but it feels like it because there are a lot of interesting things to say about definitions, including what their purpose is and how the rules of proper definition serve that purpose. For instance, definitions are made up of two components for a good reason. Identifying the genus and differentia of a concept facilitates thought in interesting ways you may not realize. I'll do a future episode on definitions, sooner rather than later if I get a lot of feedback indicating interest in it, but for now, back to libertarians. So you have genus and differentia, broad category and distinguishing characteristic. The genus of libertarianism is political philosophy. The genus of objectivism is philosophy. This already tells us something important. At the very least, we know that objectivism is broader than libertarianism. Objectivism is a collection of ideas spanning all areas of philosophical thought, whereas libertarianism relates only to politics. Why not say, then, that libertarianism is simply the political component of objectivism? After all, objectivists do consider themselves atheists. Ayn Rand didn't go around differentiating her philosophy from atheism, so why did she do it with libertarianism? What's the difference? Atheists don't believe in God, and neither did Ayn Rand, so objectivism endorses atheism. Libertarians advocate non-aggression, and Ayn Rand advocated non-initiation of force. So why doesn't objectivism endorse libertarianism? Objectivism doesn't endorse libertarianism because the distinguishing characteristic of libertarianism is the belief in the non-aggression axiom. An axiom is a starting point for a subject, a self-evident starting point that by the nature of the subject can't be denied. So in economics, production is an axiom, or rather an axiomatic concept. An axiom is a statement, but there are such things as axiomatic concepts. So in economics, production is one. In philosophy, existence is an axiomatic concept. It's incoherent to talk about economics without production, or philosophy without existence. They're self-evident, unchallengeable starting points in their contexts, although existence as such transcends all contexts. Libertarians think of non-aggression as an axiom. It doesn't need to be justified to them. In reality, though, the idea that you shouldn't force people to do things does need to be justified. It's not self-evident. Why shouldn't you force people? If you have to give an argument, it's not an axiom. Saying they treat it like an axiom is actually giving them too much credit. They're not that philosophically sophisticated. They actually just treat it like where they chose to start, and they don't even care if it's justified. If you don't consider it an axiom, but you say God told you force is wrong, then welcome aboard. You're a libertarian. Objectivism, on the other hand, holds that freedom, a ban on the initiation of force, depends on a specific, correct, rational case based on facts about human nature and the world. If your view is that the ends justify the means, you're going to lose the ends. Capitalism and freedom cannot be defended by false arguments. False arguments actually hurt the case for whatever you're arguing for. It's disastrous to consider Christians and Kantians and pragmatists and utilitarians and the rest of the detritus of the philosophical world to be defenders of freedom. Capitalism and non-aggression are not consonant with those philosophies. Objectivism is not a form of libertarianism because libertarianism is anti-philosophical, not just non-philosophical. It holds that any case for freedom is good enough, and that you don't even need a case if you don't want one. Now, there are some normal people who call themselves libertarians, who aren't anti-philosophical, and who believe simply that people shouldn't be able to force other people to do things. They may not be able to give a full case for that position, but they also don't believe that non-aggression is a starting point or can be justified in any of many mutually contradictory ways. They believe in not forcing people, and that's as far as they go. They make no claims beyond that, about the justification for that view or that view's implications. It's just no force. If this were what libertarianism were taken to mean, then yeah, I'd say objectivists were libertarians, just the way they're atheists. However, it's very often not taken that way. It's similar to feminism. No one knows what the hell you mean when you call yourself a feminist today. And likewise, no one knows what you mean when you call yourself a libertarian. It's not exactly clarifying to use those labels then. Now, because libertarians don't know how to justify non-aggression, they actually don't even know what non-aggression means. To know how to apply a principle, you need to know how you arrived at it. You need the contextualizing facts that give rise to the principle. Say you're a healthitarian, and your principle is, I need to eat a balanced diet. But you don't know how you arrived at that conclusion, and you don't care about justifying it. It just sounds good to you. In that case, you don't know what balanced diet means. Should you eat equal parts of all food groups? How should you even define food groups? Or should you eat equal parts of all macronutrients? Does a balance mean a 1-to-1 ratio? You can't just pluck health or balanced diet out of a void and go from there. The proper way to arrive at a balanced diet would be to start by noticing that you get hungry and weak without food, and then noticing that different kinds of food fulfill different needs of your body and keep it functioning, and that the functioning is what health is. Then you'd come up with the idea of balanced diet to refer to a diet consisting of the kinds of foods you need in the amounts you need by the standard of your body's full functioning. You wouldn't make the disastrous mistake of thinking balance meant a 1-to-1 ratio of fat and carbs and protein. You'd know how you arrived at balance, so you'd know what it meant. Libertarians don't know how they arrived at non-aggression, so they don't know what it means. That leads them to have political ideas as arbitrary and destructive as the dietary 1-to-1 ratio idea. For instance, you may be familiar with Dave Rubin, a comedian who runs the Rubin Report, a political talk show formerly of the Young Turks Network. Rubin considers himself a libertarian, and had the following to say about the role of government. Quote, I am a firm believer that the government should have very little to do with our lives. Make sure I don't get shot, which they're not that great at that. Take care of the economy. Keep us safe. Make sure we have a good education system. The road should be okay. You know, like pretty limited stuff. Unquote. He just wants a very limited government. All he wants it to do is enforce thinking methods on us from birth through mandatory state schooling, and then subsequently control our creative and productive lives, and of course control the infrastructure and means of mobility of the entire nation. That's it. Very limited stuff. Dave Rubin is not alone. Many libertarians think government control of this kind is perfectly consonant with liberty. Why? because they don't know what liberty looks like, because they don't know why they need it, because they don't have a fundamental philosophy. I did not go looking for this, by the way. I just happened to hear this, actually after I'd finished my script for this episode. By no means did I go looking for outliers among libertarians. You get hit in the face with this kind of thing all the time if you read or listen to a lot of political commentary. Anyway, anarchism, however, is the most common interpretation by intellectual libertarians of what political system principled non-aggression implies. They think freedom is the opposite of government, and that therefore 100% freedom means 0% government. Why do they think that? They think that because they didn't come to non-aggression through reason. They just made it up. Actually, they stole it from Ayn Rand, but were too stupid to understand how she arrived at it, so they don't know why they need it. They just have it, like the thugs to whom African dictators give farms stolen from whites, which lie rotting and misused, as do all socialized means of production. So they just take it as a starting point and deduce and avoid. Aggression means force, force is illegitimate, government has a monopoly on force, government is illegitimate. They think force can't be used in a retaliatory way, or at least that the government is somehow by definition aggressive and non-retaliatory, which, incidentally, is why so many of them are pacifists in the context of international relations. On top of not being able to discriminate between initiatory and retaliatory force, they don't even know what force means. To them, it means the use of a lot of power, which can be political power, physical force, or economic power. This is why libertarians hate big banks and corporations as well as the government. They didn't derive at a concept of force by logically integrating facts, so they don't know what it looks like. Anarchism is a rationalization for the nihilism of people who hate anything big and successful. Libertarians want the system that's most conducive to tearing things down, and that is certainly anarchism. They don't love freedom. They hate government and business. They don't hate government because they think it necessarily violates rights. They hate it because it's powerful by some measure, and any measure is good enough for them. Anarchism leads to gang warfare by necessity. Anarchism is statism. It's a total inversion of freedom. I'll go deeper into anarchism in another episode, but for now, I want to give you another example of a libertarian I just happened to hear recently. I actually heard a libertarian, a so-called anarcho-capitalist Rothbardian, make the inference that private property is totalitarian, and government intervention is actually a market influence. You could not get a more perfect reductio of libertarianism. Now, I won't publicize this creature's name, because he's a racist, anti-Semitic, alt-right, subhuman degenerate, and I don't want to contribute to expanding his audience, but the point is that his conclusion is logical, given his libertarian premises. If you think that economic power is indistinguishable from physical force, then individual property rights are totalitarian, and fascism is liberation. No ideology from which fascism can be logically inferred can be considered to subsume objectivism, the preeminent and only true defender of capitalism. Case closed. To summarize my two main points, 1. Libertarianism holds that no justification of liberty is necessary, and any is acceptable. Objectivism holds that liberty must be justified on rational, objective grounds. 2. Libertarians have no means to objectively apply their principle, which leads to logical conclusions as opposed to objectivism as anything could possibly be. If you have any questions about today's episode, just send me an email at charles.a.2@gmail.com. You can also visit my website at charlestew.com. There you can find information on and links to everything I do, including ways to support my work. The biggest way you can support my work is with a donation through Patreon, and if you do so, there are all kinds of rewards, including tutoring if you support at a certain level. Another way you can help me out without even needing money is by leaving a review for this podcast wherever you happen to listen to it. Those reviews really are helpful, and I appreciate your helping me out no matter what you do. So thanks for listening, and let's meet again in episode 9.